All right, let's get right into it. You know, the biggest number in this briefing, it's not about a market swing. It's about a deal, a pretty massive one, actually. We're talking about a tariff getting slashed from a huge 50% all the way down to 18. But, of course, there's a catch. And just so we're all on the same page, everything we're about to cover comes from documents dated February 5th, 2026. This is the very latest intelligence we have. And there's that number. This is really the heart of the matter. A US-India trade deal that takes tariffs from 50% down to just 18. I mean, that is a massive shift for market access. But the real story, the one you need to watch, is why it's happening. And this slide, well, it lays out the trade-off perfectly. So the condition for that incredible tariff cut, India has to stop buying Russian oil. Simple as that. And the goal? To use this leverage to build up India's own muscle in really critical areas, like energy, aviation, and minerals. Geopolitics isn't just a backdrop anymore. It's the currency of the deal. And that brings us to the golden thread weaving through this entire briefing, convergence. We're seeing all these lines just blur together. Things that used to live in their own separate boxes, trade policy over here, energy security over there, corporate regulation way over there, they're all merging into one single interconnected risk landscape. What you do in one arena now has a direct, and I mean direct, impact on the others. Bottom line, the space for strategic maneuver is constricting as distinct policy and risk domains converge. Let's really break this down. Now we turn to deep dives. So our first deep dive is that US-India deal. The big mental shift for every executive listening is this. Stop thinking of this as just a trade story. It's not. It's an energy, security story, and a strategic industrial policy story, all rolled into one. So let's talk stakes because they've completely changed. Your basic procurement choices, like where you source your energy, are now directly chained to whether you can even get into a market. And this isn't some isolated incident. It's a huge systemic shift where geopolitical friendships are literally redrawing the map for global supply chains.
And this puts it perfectly. The anchor, the thing we're used to hearing, is, oh, it's just a standard trade negotiation. But the twist is the real game changer. The price of admission is now a very specific geopolitical choice you have to make about energy. That changes everything.
So, what should you be watching? 3 things. First, keep a close eye on India's Russian oil import numbers. The documents say they already dipped in January. Second, track any and all follow-up conversations about critical minerals. And third, watch for any new domestic policies designed to boost those specific strategic sectors mentioned in the deal. Bottom line, trade barriers, energy pathways, and industrial planning are no longer separate policy threads. They are now one interdependent decision framework. Okay, so that's the pressure from the outside. Now let's look inside. Our second deep dive covers a massive Supreme Court intervention in an alleged fraud investigation worth a staggering 40,000 crore rupees. This really shows how the judicial envelope is tightening. The stakes here are just immense, from the individual right up to the entire system. On a personal level, you have a major figure assuring the court he won't flee the country. That screams serious personal liability. But for the whole system, the big news is the Supreme Court itself stepping in to direct the investigation. That means enforcement can now speed up dramatically on a judge's order. Let's use our framework again. The anchor, the familiar story is, this is just another high-profile corporate fraud investigation. We've seen that movie before. But the twist is what's totally new and significant. The Supreme Court is now acting as the project manager. They're setting deadlines, they're structuring the teams. This is a fundamental shift in what judicial oversight looks like. And look how fast this is moving. The court pointed to an unexplained delay and just slammed down a new, much faster timeline. A special investigation team is in place, and fresh status reports are due from the CBI and the ED in just 4 weeks. Bottom line, judicial oversight is shifting from passive review to active project management, increasing the pace and intensity of enforcement. For our last deep dive, we're looking at the aviation sector. The Competition Commission has ordered a probe into Indigo, but this isn't just about high ticket prices. It's about how a company with that much market power handles major operational meltdowns. The stakes here really redefine what competition risk means for any dominant player. Regulators aren't just looking at pricing anymore. They're asking about things like artificial scarcity and operational resilience. The question has evolved from, are your prices fair, to is your service dependable when your customers have nowhere else to go?
So the anchor is that familiar complaint, hey, this is a regulatory issue about high flight prices. But the twist is where the real change is. No, this is about your operational resilience being tested as a competition issue, precisely because consumer choice is so limited. That is a major expansion of what regulators are looking at.
So what should you be watching for? Well, the probe is going to get into the weeds. Did the airline have enough of a buffer to handle problems? Do they follow the rules on crew rest? And the big one, what was the actual impact of their market dominance on consumers stuck in the middle of a crisis? Bottom line, the regulatory envelope is tightening around corporate conduct, linking trade, judiciary, and competition scrutiny. So if we step back from these specific stories, what are the bigger forces at play here? Now we turn to undercurrents. Beyond the headlines, there are systemic shifts to watch. And these are the deeper currents that are really driving that convergence we've been talking about. Let's just quickly walk through these 4 systems. First, geopolitics. Strategic supply chains are now geopolitical tools, which exposes any company that relies on critical inputs. Second, law and regulation. The courts are demanding more integrity in the process, which means way more scrutiny for corporations and their lenders. Third, business and markets. Yeah, domestic money is stabilizing things, but that just means governance and conduct risk are an even bigger priority. And finally, climate and energy. Specific policies like subsidies are now basically dictating how infrastructure gets built out. Bottom line, these systemic shifts are the machinery driving the convergence of risk. Okay, last up, what's just starting to pop up on the horizon? Now we turn to on the radar. We've got 2 weak signals, places where this convergence trend could pop up next. First, the nuclear sector is opening up. The law is there, but the detailed regulations needed to actually unlock investment, still waiting on those. Second, that critical minerals pact between the US and India. The documents say they're eyeing a deal, but let's be clear, talks are not a done deal. Bottom line, these signals indicate where the next phase of convergence between policy and investment will be tested. So let's tie all of this together. Now we turn to the final synthesis. When you pull all these threads together, it really forces a pretty critical question for anyone in a leadership position. Given this new converged world, what do you have to reassess right now? Here's the breakdown. What's fundamentally changed is that trade, energy, and geopolitics are now all part of the same transaction. And the judiciary is getting much more hands-on. But what hasn't changed is that the underlying policy and demand that drive economic activity, that's all still there. So the operating space is definitely getting tighter, but it hasn't closed. And that really leads us to the final crucial question that every leadership team needs to be asking itself. Take a hard look at your own organization. Is your risk framework actually built for this new era of convergence, or is it still stuck operating in yesterday's silos? Bottom line, the central challenge is no longer managing separate risks, but navigating their convergence.